Welcome to the Children's Author Show. If you ever dreamed of writing a book that inspires young minds, builds a lasting brand, and even creates a sustainable career, then you're in the right place. From crafting unforgettable stories, to marketing your books, to even monetizing your brand, we'll cover everything that you need to succeed as a children's author. So grab your notebook, fuel that creativity, and let's make your author dreams a reality. This is the Children's Author Show. Well, welcome to the Children's Author Show. My name is Andy Coates. I'm an award-winning author, book coach, and your host of the Children's Author Show. And this is a podcast where we help children's authors just like you build your author brand by learning more about the industry and getting to meet some fun experts who are inside of the industry and learning from their different skill sets, their insights, and their knowledge. So whether you're just starting out or you're looking to grow as a children's author, you are in the right place. And today we have a very special treat for you. In fact, we have an author illustrator joining us to discuss her journey, as well as talk about how it's never too late to follow your dreams. So welcome to the podcast, Laura Muncie. Laura, welcome.
Hi, Andy. Thanks very much. What a nice introduction. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, glad to have you on the show today. And, before we jump into this, you may recognize Laura because she was on a roundtable conversation we had where I had a lot of illustrators join me, and a lot that were interested in being part of that conversation. We narrowed it down to just a select few and had some great conversation. If you haven't seen that yet, check out that roundtable discussion with some illustrators. Laura was on that, and it was a fun time we had. But I decided I need to bring her back and just jump into her story a little bit, find out about her, and share her story with you today. So instead of just giving a bio and reading something about Laura, I just want to jump into her story. So let's do this. Laura, I'm excited to have you on the show. So I have a bunch of questions, but let's start out with, tell us a little bit more about your journey. Walk us through your story, life, all that kind of stuff.
Okay, sure. I live over in a small town in Germany called Oberthausen, but originally I'm from Scotland, and I came over here with my husband's job relocated, and we came over here. And originally I was in banking; that was my profession, and I really became interested in illustration following some difficult times in my own life. Unfortunately, my husband and I lost a child, and we also lost my brother to cancer within a few months of each other.
Wow.
And during that time, we shortly went into lockdown here in Germany during the COVID pandemic, the first lockdown. So it was quite a difficult period. And so I started drawing and sketching on my little balcony in Oberthausen during the lockdowns as a kind of a way of relaxing originally, and just kind of chilling and relaxing. And from there, I just started to realize I absolutely love this. I really love this. And so I got more and more into it. And I would post little sketches and paintings on Facebook. And originally friends and family would kind of give me a thumbs up or a like or leave a comment. I think most of the time they just kind of were trying to encourage me because they knew that I had some difficult times. And so they were being very generous and kind, and they were just kind of, reaching out and being encouraging. But from there, it just kind of grew. And yeah, during the pandemic, I painted really quite a lot on the balcony. And in Germany, we have these little apartments next to each other. So sometimes I would see my neighbors kind of looking over, and it became really a nice way to connect with the outside world. So it just grew and grew. And then I ended up having books, illustrating books. So this is how it progressed, really.
That's fun. So for you, going through a difficult season of life, and it sounds like quite a few difficult moments. So hitting you kind of back to back to back, and kind of stepped into illustrating in a very therapeutic way, getting out on the balcony. For you, this was just a way to escape and process and turn into what I would consider something out of a story, out of some kind of movie where you're in Europe on your balcony and painting and everybody's looking in and watching, and it feels like something I would see in a movie or read in a book. And here you are living this out. And so what kind of, knowing that little bit of background for you coming from banking into just in lockdown and a lot of tragic moments, what kind of sparked that love, I guess, for art? Was it already in you? Like, did you already love the arts and that's why it came back to the surface, or did it start there in that moment on the balcony?
Well, I like how glamorous you've made it sound. So it was it really wasn't like that. I had kids in the house, and it was a bit of a time, a bit more real than movie like, if I'm being honest. But
I'm
I
trying
can
to tell a story here, Like
I can appreciate it. It sounds pretty romanticized if I'm standing painting on a balcony. Well, I was always arty. I mean, I was always creative, but I had left that behind me at school because, in Scotland, we have opportunities to go into the arts, but oftentimes it's better to be more practical and to take something that's going to lead to a more stable, secure path financially and career-wise. And so I really hadn't gone any place with it, really. So all my drawings sort of finished about 15 or 16 years old. And really, I think what I was doing on the balcony was trying to externalize how I felt on the inside. And the arts are known for being incredibly therapeutic. They are an outlet. In fact, in Scotland, they even have a program called Right to Recover, which is a writing program for people who have maybe had traumatic events or are dealing with substance abuse or dealing with some difficulty in their life, and they can write as a way of recovering. So this is a recognized thing, it is therapeutic, and so it really did properly start on the balcony.
At least a respark some, we'll
yes,
just say
endless
10 plus years, to not giving away any age of you here. We'll
Thank
say
you.
10 years later, it sparked it. So you had this little artistic moment kind of rekindled inside of you, and found it to be very healing for you on this balcony to spend some time. It developed a little bit of community during a time of life where we didn't have a lot of opportunity for face-to-face community. And even just trying to process some of those things without having community can be difficult. And so for you, you didn't go out there to start preparing to transition into a new career, but what made that actually transition? So going from a personal therapeutic moment on a balcony to stepping into the professional illustrating career, how did that kind of shift? What did that look like, that transition?
Well, I started taking online courses because I wanted to get better. I wanted to develop, and I really was so curious about it that I wanted to get better and better. And through my online courses, I got a tremendous amount of encouragement. I had tutors that were established artists in their own right, and through their kind of structured feedback and critiques of what I was doing, they really instilled into me this feeling that this was a possibility, that I could take this further, that I could go further with it. And I think that made a huge difference to me, to have someone at a professional level saying, you have a skill, you do need developing, but you have it, it's there, and you have the talent. And so, my first thing that I did was I had written some poetry. Along with the paintings, I was also writing poetry. And I had taken a piece of poetry and some artworks, art paintings, to the Frankfurt Book Festival, which is the biggest book festival in the world. I wasn't particularly organized about it. I just looked at the catalogue of publishers. I picked the first catalogue name on the catalogue, and I just took my paintings in a little case and some poetry that I had written, and I went to the first publisher, and I got there, And there was a queue waiting to speak to the publisher, and there was somebody in the booth next door, and they said, "What are you doing?" And, they were just making small talk, and I showed them my stuff, and they said, "Oh, they don't do kids' picture books." And I thought, "Oh, what a waste of time." And then the person said, "But you know what? I would just show it to them anyway. Just go and show it to them." So I kind of stood in line, and I met the publisher, and she was very encouraging. And she said, "I really, really like what you're doing. So when you put together something a little bit more firm, when it's a little bit more pulled together, get in touch with me." And she gave me her business card. And her husband is also an artist. He is a established artist. And he also liked it. So I got some positive feedback at that book festival, and I stayed in touch with them, and I did what they said. I went away. I developed, I did more training. And through the training, I also met a teacher who really pulled me up a level and really developed. And so from there, that's where it sort of developed. I set up a website. I went back to the publisher with a manuscript, which was called What Love Can Do, which was the first picture book that I've written and illustrated. They accepted it. They translated it into Portuguese. And then they launched it at the Frankfurt Book Festival a couple of years later. So I was at that point a proper author and writer, an illustrator. And so that was pretty cool.
Yeah. So you do some training, get online, like most of us do when we're trying to learn something. Is our first instinct is to let me get on and learn some stuff online. And then it shifted to getting some actual training from some other illustrators and some actual professionals to help you develop and grow. So what are some of those key lessons maybe you learned through that experience of having other people training and pouring into you that maybe you didn't realize on your own from just getting that training and development?
Yeah, there's some really big lessons that I learned. One thing is that don't neglect the hands, because art directors and publishing houses, they will look at hands. So you need to be able to develop that skill. And there's many courses. It doesn't have to be difficult. There are courses online that can teach you shortcuts and ways to draw hands. So you don't need to get intimidated by that. Sometimes it is intimidating to do hands, but you can do it. You can get some tips and tricks. The other thing that I learned was be mindful of the age of your characters. Make sure that the characters, that your drawings are at the right age group, and eyes can be really important for that. So, for example, if the eyes are further up the head, the character's a little bit older. If you want the character to look younger, you move the eyes further down the head and maybe make them wider apart. So making sure your character has the right age appearance, that's really important. Posing them, showing them in different poses, so showing that you can effectively turn the character and have their facial expression still be recognizable as that same character, which is quite challenging, but that is a skill that has to be established and developed. The other thing was to develop your own taste. This is very much taste thing, and in everything, we have our own taste. I mean, we have our own taste in how we dress. We have our own taste in music. We have our own taste in cars. And it's the same in art. There's a huge breadth of different styles and tastes, and really explore what your taste is. And you can do that through experimenting with different medium. But you can also do it with looking at colors. One of the things that I learned was you try to establish what is your color palette taste. And you might not think, I don't have a color palette taste, but you do. So if you look around your house, what colors are your walls? What color are your furniture? Even go in your wardrobe, take all your clothes out, put them on the bed, and look at the clothes and say, what are the reoccurring colors here? Is there a pattern? And there will be a pattern. You will be surprised. And from that, you can develop a palette. So you can photograph these things. You can photograph your walls. You can photograph your clothes, and you can digitally pick those colors out. and look
Yeah.
at them and make a swatch, make a palette. And that's part of your taste. And that forms a kind of unique visual identity, so to speak.
I like that. Now if we went in my closet and we pulled out my clothes to determine, you would say, well, Andy, you just want black and white is what you want, because I have most of my shirts are black and white, and I don't have a whole lot of, the color I have is because my wife tries to put a little bit of color into my life. What are
Well,
some of those
Johnny Cash built a career in wearing black.
That's true.
So,
That's very true.
so your colors are your colors, and you can build a career around that identity.
And there's
So,
plenty of different shades of the grays that I can, pull in to make it really light or really dark. There's plenty of options just staying
yeah.
in the black and white world. So when it comes to finding your own style and developing that, what was that like for you to navigate? What is it that, whether that's with color or whether that's with different artistic expressions, how do you navigate those challenges, and what are some of those challenges that you face in figuring out your own style?
Well, I think I'm like many illustrators in that I'm quite experimental. I think that's just part of being a creative person. And that brings a challenge because you may flit from different styles and find enjoyment in different styles, whether it's doing collage, whether it's doing more pop art style, whether it's taking pastels and working with those or going digital. So I would say, don't be scared of the experimental stage.
Yeah.
Just try, experiment. They don't all have to be part of your portfolio. You can try and you can experiment. I experimented a lot. I tried lots of different things. I even tried painting with twigs and all kinds of little different painting with string, creating textures, all different kinds of things, photographing. I mean, digitally, you can create your own brushes by photographing textures. So you can go out to the woods, take pictures of bark. You can take pictures of spices or flower and transport those into digital pen tips. So be experimental, try, and as you go through those experimental, there will be things that you enjoy much more than others. And perhaps that is going to be your style. Whether it feels more comfortable to work in a pastel, soft, dreamy kind of look, or whether you feel more comfortable in the comic book style, whatever it is, you will start to be drawn towards a style. But let it out. Just try all the different things. Let it out. Don't try to hold it back. Let it out. Experiment a little, and then you will, I think, find one that's more you, so to speak.
Yeah, I think a lot of artists get scared. They're worried about, because if you're doing this as a paid project, you don't want to experiment on somebody's paid work. But in our practice, get out there and just try some stuff.
Yeah.
And you don't want to try that for the first time on somebody's book cover or inside an illustration, but practice, get out there and just try some stuff and see what it. All of the arts were discovered from people taking risk and trying a few things and having fun with it. And I love that. Even the idea of creating your own brushes, that's a fun thing to do. So what thinking of illustrators here, what do you think are those most important skills that they need to develop in their art, trying to become a better illustrator? What are some of those skills you think are important to focus in on developing?
Definitely developing the hands, getting the hands right, getting the eyes right, like I talked about, but also understanding the narrating voice. So I mentioned this in the last podcast a little bit, which is when you get a manuscript, there is a narrating voice. And what I mean by narrating voice is that voice that you hear in your head when you read something. And there are different narrating voices. So, for example, one manuscript might have a really whimsical, dreamy, gentle, poetic kind of narration. And maybe from there you can build an illustration style that complements that, maybe a dreamy, whimsical style. And it's good practice to take some lines from manuscripts, from even books that you know, and try to illustrate those lines, and see how it comes out. So you have to be able to match the words and the pictures, and you can go in different ways. I mean, you can, if it's lyrical and dreamy and whimsical, you can go that way, or you can try and go against it a little bit. So, for example, with What Love Can Do, I wrote, it's very on its own, the manuscript. I put it in front of some editors, and they generally loved it. But then they said, there's only one little thing, and it could get a bit saccharine-y. It could be a little bit, sickly. So have a think about that. And so I took it away, and I thought, okay, so I don't want to go watercolor here, because it's just going to build on top of that sort of image. So I went in the other way, and I use very bold colors. In fact, the cover of What Love Can Do has got a black background, which is very unusual for a picture book. So I went kind of dramatic and black, with bold colors on top, and that did some kind of balancing effect against the text. So you can do it the other way. So really listen to the narrating voice, and try to understand it and visualize how that looks when you're reading.
Yeah, I think that kind of leads into another thought that I'd love for us to explore is, as you get a manuscript from, say you're taking on an author as a client to do the illustrating for them, and that author has a vision in mind of how they want this to unfold. How do you bring that vision to life? And so there's the narrating voice piece that you want to be able to listen to, but what does that look like for you? Like a kind of step by step when you take on that book project. Where do you start, and what does that look like?
Well, for the most part, I've worked directly with publishers. But if you are working directly with an author, the same kind of rules apply in a way. I would say do a really thorough check at the beginning. I really get an understanding of what that author wants from you. Because, as you say, when they're writing, they have a visual in their mind usually, and you might startle them by presenting something in an unexpected way. So really do a bit of fact finding in the beginning, because it's going to save you problems later down the road.
Yeah.
So maybe ask them things like, from my portfolio, you found me online. Which of my portfolio pieces do you like? I don't want to know this because it's good for me, my ego, or whatever. I'm trying to understand what draws you in, of what you like and what your taste is. And so get them to kind of point out pieces in your portfolio they really like. Now, that's going to be a big indicator of the kind of style that they're looking for their project.
Right.
And ask probing questions, saying, what is it you like about it? Can you articulate what areas? Is it the colors you like? Is it the character design? Is it the size of the characters' heads? Is it the way they're dressed? Is it the action or the pacing? What is it, that you like? And I really think this helps, because you start to build a picture up of their expectations, and that helps you keep close to their expectations, and always be open. If you think things are going off in a direction that wasn't explained to you in the beginning, try to bring it back to the original idea, bring it back to your earlier discussion points. That's how I would approach it, because it's their baby. It's hard, especially if somebody's handing a project over to you. It's their baby, and so they're expecting a certain loyalty to their vision. So you have to understand what that vision is to begin with, so that things don't go off track. That's how I would approach it. And do thumbnails, do a sketch, a first sketch for them. Let them see the sketch, let them approve the sketch, and take it step by step. Break it into stages. So stage 1 is your thumbnails, where you sketch the book out, or stage 1 is one sketch of the manuscript.
Right.
And let them see that, and let them approve that, and let them make their feedback on that. If the character's the right age, if the character's how they imagined. And that means you're not too far deep into the project before there might be feedback that it's not right. So step by step, break it down to these shorter steps at the beginning, and get them to sign off on everything before you move to the next step. That would be how I would approach it.
You don't want to spend all that time developing and then be like, I don't like any of it.
Yes.
And you're back at the very beginning because
exactly.
because it could just be the character doesn't translate. Maybe everything else works, but it's not the character. So I think, I like the idea of start with a small piece of it and make sure you get that right to know that you're, especially with the self-publishing side, because if you haven't been in the traditional space, realize that you never get to talk with the illustrator if you're an author. That just doesn't happen. The publishers deal with the illustrators, you deal with the publishers, and so that they play middleman on the project and bringing that to life. Now, it works really well because illustrators their aim is to bring your story to life. But realize that too, when you're as a self-published author and you want this illustrator to bring what they bring to the table, their goal, as you're hearing from Laura today, is to bring your story to life. So it does require a little bit of trust. Trust them in the process, and then be real clear on where you're struggling with it, if it's not working, and why it's not working. Because if you're like, I don't like it, well, that doesn't help them out from an illustrator standpoint. That's a little bonus for you right there for all of our listeners, is that great communication with your illustrator is definitely helpful. So now, Laura, with different tools that you might use. So if you're gonna create this, maybe you have different styles that the author connects to, or that you want to use for a project. What tools do you primarily use when it comes to doing your artwork and your illustrations?
I primarily work with Procreate, which is an app on that you can use on the iPad. But what I do is to try. Procreate's quite widely used, and there can be difficulties if you are using something that's quite widely used, because it can be over time obvious that you are using the same tools as other people. So there are things that you can do to differentiate yourself from the others. So what I do is, for example, I look at other illustrators. I look at some of the top artists working out there. Many of them have brought out their own brush tools, their own brush sets, digital brush sets, and you can buy a bundle, and you can experiment with them and incorporate them into your art. Other things that I do is I look at the Pantone color for the season. They bring out regularly palettes, color palettes, and I look at those color palettes and see if they fit with my taste and whether I can use those. That can keep things nice and fresh and current. And that's really what I do. But because I have quite a painterly style, I do paint in quite a lot into my Procreate illustrations. So I try to make it harder to look like it's digital, because it does have a more painterly style. So a lot of brush strokes, a lot of depth to it. And I paint it up as if I was painting a canvas. So I work from the back to the front. And I work in one complete piece rather than cutting things up and pasting them on. That doesn't really work for me. I work in one canvas from the back to the front. And I do work in layers, but I don't work in many layers. Some artists have a huge amount of digital layers. I don't because I like to have things like a painter would almost working together. So I find the multiple layer thing kind of difficult for me. But many artists like having layers and options for layers. But I layer as if I'm a painter on the layer rather than having these extra digital layers, if that makes sense.
Right.
If you know the apps, you know that you can build layers on top of each other. So that's the kind of tools I use to make mine.
And I love that extra tip there of like working from the back forward in the canvas, just like you would in painting. You don't want to start with that primary object up front. A lot of illustrators who are just getting started, if they have a character that's going to be in a scene, they will start with the character, and then they got to build the scene around that character. And oftentimes it doesn't work well versus, especially in a picture book where you also have text that's going to be on the page as well. And so usually the character just feels like they're out of place because they've built the scene. Instead of working from the back forward, they start forward and then try to put the back in around. And it doesn't work well that way, just artistically. So I love that little extra piece of advice. Now, if you are an illustrator and you're working on a project, let's say, well, you are an illustrator, but just thinking for our audience here, they're starting into a project, and all of a sudden, in the writing world, we would call this a writer's block, where you're in the flow, and all of a sudden you hit a brick wall, and you can't get past it. Like, it's just not working for you, and you have deadlines, and you have things you're trying to accomplish, and what you're trying to get. Well, in the writing world, a lot of times that can just lock you up, and you don't know what to do next, and people will sit in that space of being in a writer's block for a long time for many authors. So what are some recommendations from the illustrator side? Because that happens for illustrators too. They get in those creative blocks. What would you recommend for how to handle those challenges and those illustrating blocks that you find yourself in?
Well, I can relate for sure. I can really relate to that because it does happen. It does.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons I think it happens is if you've been intensively working on something for a long time, you maybe start to tense up a little bit and you can overthink it, and then you hit a wall. And so I think that has happened to me too. And I do have things that I do to get myself sort of unearth myself and dig myself out of it. Sometimes just going into nature, it's really relaxing. If things have gotten a bit busy in your mind, I'll go out on my bike and I'll cycle through the forest, and I'll sit and I'll just look around myself and listen and take in the sights, because we live in a beautiful world, and I'm trying to create a mini world that's visually beautiful. So sometimes just sitting in our own worlds, looking around, can help unlock, that problem. But if that doesn't work for you, another thing that has worked for me is to go out people watching. Maybe sounds strange, because if I'm stuck with a character, I think, how am I going to portray this character? Or my characters in my portfolio are starting to look too similar, because maybe I have a sort of preference towards drawing a certain way. How do I put various characters and vary the poses, vary the expressions? So I will go and sit, take myself into Frankfurt and sit in the street and people watch, and don't be creepy about it or anything, but just like sit, you can sit and I order a drink or something, take my sketchbook. And in Frankfurt, we're lucky we can have, outdoor cafes and things where they have nice umbrellas and you can sit outside and just have a look. And just watch the people that are walking past. I mean, there'll be people maybe walking their dog, and the dog has a funny little jacket on, and you might think, oh, that pattern on that jacket, I could do my own version of that for costume design for one of the characters. Or you might see somebody's hairstyle is a certain way, and that gives you a character idea. Or somebody opens their bag and drops something, and then you think, oh, I could incorporate that into my scene. Or and it sounds funny, but here in Germany, some of the buildings don't have air conditioning like you do have in the States.
Yeah.
So one of the things that people do is they air their buildings out quite a lot, and they air their bedding out quite a lot. So I've been in situations where I'm sitting in a cafe thinking, I don't know what kind of design to put on the fabric of this character, and there's somebody shaking out their blankets out the balcony. And then I look at the blanket and I think, oh, that's really got a cute design. What if that squiggle there on that duvet, and then I add some dots or some triangles, and then all of a sudden you have a pattern, So just maybe go out into the world and just sit for a little bit and do something else, watch or work on something for fun. Just draw something completely different for fun without the pressure. Take the pressure off and just let it come loose, draw loosely. And that will loosen everything out again. And I also listen to music a lot when I draw. It's really almost impossible for me not to draw without music. And lyrics.
What kind of music do you listen to when you're drawing? Is it like a certain type, or do you mix it up?
I really, really, really love Kate Bush. And so I think I went through a Kate Bush era where I listened to Wuthering Heights on repeat constantly. And from there, from Wuthering Heights, I got many portfolio pieces. So I found her very inspirational because she's so unusual in the way she sings. So there are people that you enjoy in the lyrics or the style. And it got really so bad that my husband bought me headphones because there's only so much of Kate Bush singing Wuthering Heights in the house that a man can endure before it becomes
Yeah.
a problem. So yeah, Wuthering Heights by Kate Bush, I really enjoy. Bjork, so unusual artists, and something in the way they sing or Kate Bush is very, very, very unusual because she combined many artistic styles in one. So she's a composer, but she was a dancer, contemporary dancer. She also, in Wuthering Heights, is a book. So she was portraying a storyline of a book. She was also dancing as a ghost in the book when she did her video. So there's many things combined in her work that, for me, provides many visual prompts.
Yeah.
So when she's singing Wuthering Heights, I'm thinking about the book. I'm thinking about her dancing. I'm thinking about the expressions on her faces when she was dancing because she was very expressive as an artist. So there's certain people that really I go back to a lot.
I love that. So even there's the element of get out of your setting and get into nature, get out there and people watch. Then there's the kind of escaping a little bit of draw something different, something you love, something you enjoy, something you don't have to think about that you're not on a deadline for, and then add some different flavor of artistic expression like music into it so that you can have other inspiration that's helping fuel versus just the silence. And so I love those escapes that are really tools to help. That creative block is coming because there's something that's trying to get out, and it's running into maybe you're exhausted, maybe you're struggling, but the art is there. It's finding it.
Yeah.
So sometimes it just takes unlocking it in a new way to open that door up. So I love that there's some tools there for those of you who are illustrators, or really if you're writing, even those same tools can apply. I know for me, sometimes if I'm writing something and I feel like I'm stuck, I bounce to sketching something, or I move to a different part of a project that I'm working on. So it's just bouncing to the next thing until that inspiration starts to, and once it starts flowing, you're back in the groove again.
Yeah. Or change paper. I mean, sometimes white paper can be very intimidating. That sounds ridiculous, I know. But the blank page staring at you, that white paper, can be a bit off-putting because your mind's blank too. So change the color of the paper. So I very rarely draw on a white canvas. I regularly change it to a pale yellow or pale gray or a pale brown. And sometimes I just find that change alone gives me another push in another direction. So things like that, just change slightly something and you might unlock yourself.
Yeah. I love that. I love it. So let's shift a little bit here in our time remaining. I want to kind of move toward, you are an author and illustrator, and so you have your own book. So your picture book, What Love Can Do, that was your first book, right? And walk us through that launch process. You hinted at it earlier, and I want to explore that some. What did that look like in launching that book for you?
Well, the publisher was extremely supportive and from the very beginning. And so they decided they were going to launch it as part of their collection at the Frankfurt Book Messe, which is the largest book festival in the world. So that was a huge milestone for me, a big difference from drawing on my balcony to being launched in Frankfurt. And they have
real fast. What was that time frame like between, like when you went to the festival and you met them at that table,
Yeah.
to when you started the project with them? What was that time frame like?
From first meeting to being launched at Frankfurt, I think it was 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah. Because publishing collections are done quite a bit in advance.
Yeah.
So it's not like when you hand it in your work in 2 months' time, it hits a physical product. They have their lead times, they have their print runs, and usually they are already booked with their print runs for the year. So they're looking ahead, forecasting for the next year or the following 2 years later, or whatever. So you have to have some patience and understanding there if you're working with a publisher. So so that was about 2 years. And in the Frankfurt Book Messe, there was a cube, an autograph cube, and people go in and sit in the cube, the artist or the author, and they sign copies of the book. So my publisher had booked the cube for me, got my name written on the cube, and I sat in the cube and signed books, which was really an amazing moment. Sitting
And
in
this
the
is like a fancy thing, right? Like they set
yeah,
this up really
it's a
high
big
end, huh?
cube. Yeah, it's a big cube. I mean, I was sitting beside it. I can't remember his name now, but he was a writer from LA, and he's a news reporter, and he was in the cube with me. I mean, people have sat in the cube that are high level authors and artists. So it was a wonderful opportunity, and it partly came about because the pandemic was still going on. So some of the big names were away from the festival and were not available to be booked, which actually opened up an opportunity for medium-sized publishing houses to present their people and for selection. So they marketed they on the front of the booth with my book, and it was amazing. It was really an amazing moment.
What were some of the next things that happened? I know that it received some recognition. What happened there with the book?
Well, it was translated into 2 languages. It was in English, but it was also in Portuguese. And so the book was translated, which is in itself a really fascinating process because my book was in rhyme. So translating into rhyme is quite a challenge, but it is possible. So I believe there were 2 or 3 translators working on the translation for it. And so that was really interesting to learn about that and find my book in another language. And actually, I preferred it in Portuguese.
Portuguese is such a beautiful language.
Yeah, and the rhythm of it was in Portuguese. It had a more beautiful rhythm than in the English version. So I found it more beautiful anyway. And so it was picked up by bloggers and also bloggers attached to the Montessori network in Portugal, and they named it one of their books of the week. And so it was in stores and things in Portugal, and I even learned that a bookstore had made book pillows, which is a little pillow that a child can take into their bed with them, and they put your book inside. So they marketed my book with a little pillow, which was really adorable. I'd never seen anything like that before. So
it slides into a little pocket on the pillow and
in the pocket in the pillow, and they can
nice.
take it to bed with them if they want to, and just look at it when take it in and out. So it's just to make it a bit more tactile, a bit more accessible, and so that was really, really lovely to see something like that happening, because not a thing I even knew existed. So that was lovely. Yeah.
Yeah, I've never had any of my books where they've put pillows with them, so I'm a little jealous right now that you got a pillow with yours. But also, something I've never thought about. I think this is great for all of us who are in this space. If you have a picture book that is a rhyming book, when that's translated, I've never even considered the fact that the translation more than likely will not rhyme exactly how your book that's I don't know why that's never processed for me, but that's very helpful to know. And like you say, it can be done, but it's a little more, it's not just word for word trying to translate out, it's then making it where it has the same flow and the same rhythmic element to it. I never thought about that.
The technical aspects, the scansion as we would call it, the scansion and the rhythm and there's a very technical aspect to that. There's different types of rhythm. And so they have to adopt most likely another rhythm. So for example, what Love Can Do was in a 1-2. So it's 1-2, 1-2, 1-2, 1-2. But when it went into Portuguese, it went 1-2-3-1. 1-2-3, 1-2-3, 1-2-3, 1. So actually I preferred it in the Portuguese because I thought that it was more lyrical. So when they translate it, you cannot do word for word. It just won't work. So they have to understand the meaning. They have to attach a similar feel, meaning, and sometimes the rhythm will change depending on how they're going to work it. So it makes it a hard in terms of the publishing world, which is a whole other beast. If you are a writer who writes picture books and rhyme, it can be more challenging to let you know and to sell that product or to try to get a publisher interested in that. It doesn't mean that it can't happen. It can. There's always room for another one, and people really, really love rhyming books. So it's an attractive proposition, but it's just not always quite so easy. So it's something to be aware of, and also something I didn't know until I was a bit deeper into it all. So it's something to keep in your mind if you're writing.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, especially if you're wanting to get into, you're looking at international distribution and you're wanting it in something other than English. While English is very much because a lot of times books that are written in English are used to help teach English in other countries, it's still also very, it's good to have that option of having it translated into the language of whatever country you're trying to get into, because it helps to sell a little bit better there as well. So that's definitely and if it's in the rhyming world, that rhythmic world, you want to make sure that it's going to flow and not feel muddy or choppy because of the translation. So if you decide you want to get it translated, you probably want to sit down with somebody who understands that world before you just have somebody translate it word for word. So that's a very helpful tool. If you take nothing else away from this, even we're not even talking illustration here, but that's a very helpful just bit of wisdom that we receive. So what are some of the other books that you've illustrated in your portfolio?
I illustrated. The most recent one is A Very Merry Muddy Christmas. And that was for an American publisher. It's a Christmas story. So that was a lot of fun because it was a wonderful, cute topic. And I love Christmas. And so that was a lot of fun to do. And it suited the kind of things I like to draw because there were lots of nighttime scenes. And I love to draw really dramatic skies. And of course, that lends itself to that painterly look. So I got a lot of fun out of making very dramatic nighttime thundery skies. So that was a lot of fun, and I had farm animals and stuff. So that was really a fun project. Another one that I've done is a German coloring book, which is now being picked up by another publisher and will become, originally I did it myself. I self-published it in German and sold it to local bookshops in my state. And that was also a wonderful experience because I loved going to the printing house and I loved like the actual hands-on side of seeing everything, how it works, from picking the paper to talking to the printer guys to working with them on the editing side, getting the layouts correct. So there was a lot of learning in just doing.
Right.
So I really enjoyed that. And then it's going to be in a publisher in the US. And it will go into English and it will also go into Portuguese at some point. So that was really fun, and learning about different weights of paper. And the whole process was a lot of fun because I went to bookshops and I asked them, what do you think? And they gave me feedback. And I then took that feedback and went back to printers and said, we need to change some of this. Particularly paper quality was quite important. So that was a lot of fun. And as I say, that's grown wings and it's going somewhere else now. So that can also be a thing that happens if you self-publish and have a small distribution locally. You can then pitch to a publisher and see with a product, go to a book festival to meet a publisher and have a mock-up of your book and let them see how it's going to look. And the attention to detail that you've given to it. That's also a way in to talk to publishers.
As something you and I have talked about off camera, is the value of being in those in-person events and going to those festivals and networking there. Because if you were to submit that, just as a general rule of thumb to the industry, is you don't submit a project that's already been created. They don't accept usually manuscripts that have already been written or self-published. But when you take something to a festival and say, here's what I've done, here's what I've, well, now they have something to look at and put their hands to, and they may say, we want it. And you're not going to get that if you're just submitting into the piles of assistants of assistants of assistants that never get to a decision maker. So you and I've talked about the significance of that.
Yeah. And it's really important if you're an illustrator to get in front of the art directors. I mean, I have found that invaluable because you can go to smaller festivals and you can book slots. It's very commonplace. You book a slot, they put out a call, an open call, and they give time slots, and you book yourself in. You have to be quick because they go like that. So you have to be quick, and then you get in front of your art directors, and you can show them your mock-up, or you can show them your portfolio, what you've been working on. And even just understanding their reactions is very important information for you, because you might be wondering, why am I not getting work? Where am I going wrong? And going in front of those art directors, you see face-to-face reactions, which you don't get by sending an email. You just get a decline or we'll come back to you sometime. But going face-to-face, you can look at them, and if you see them lingering on something, you might want to say, is there something there that you want to feedback on? Is that, would that cause a problem, or is there some suggestion you have here? And invite them into dialogue. And you may find that another art director has a similar reaction, and you might start to see a pattern and say, okay, I need to improve on this area, or I know that they really like that part of my portfolio, so I need to develop that part. If it's the painterly style, for example. So feedback I got at Book Festival was, go for the painterly style because it suits you and has a lot of warmth and depth. So you can't get that from an email. You just can't get that from an email drop. So if you can afford to go to these festivals where you can book in, like Bologna, like Frankfurt. I know it's a long way away for American listeners, but there's probably similar things in the United States. Just get in front of them and find out what they think of you and your work. And you'll be able to build on that.
Or if you're like my wife, who's probably going to be listening to this, saying, I guess we need to take a business trip over to Europe so that you can go get your books to these festivals. I guess we can go do that. Make a trip out of it, right? A fun vacation over to Europe and the States.
Well, they have some really amazing, they have really good festivals also in England. Yeah. I mean, there's lots of smaller festivals where they have meet art directors, they have call outs. So you have to get on the internet, start doing your research, find out where these festivals happen, get on the website, look for the call outs for illustrators, book yourself in. So there's a bit of background homework you got to do, but I think it's worth it. It's been worth it for me, for sure. It's really worth it. Much more than sending out emails to a hit list,
Right.
Because they remember you more if you're there as well.
Yeah, you're just another submission if it's going to an email. But if you're in person, they make a human connection that goes a whole lot further than just another digital submission.
Yeah,
I think that's some great advice. Is there any other advice you'd give to maybe those aspiring illustrators that are trying to break into the industry? What would be maybe any other advice that you would have to give to them?
Don't give up. Love your characters an awful lot. Really put a lot of love and time into them because it pays off. Do your sketch, get your sketch as accurate as you possibly can before you move to color. That will save you a lot of problems later. and try to get feedback on your portfolio, get portfolio reviews, because there may be just one little area that is tripping you up and you don't know what you don't know. So until those people are able to identify, and the industry people are able to articulate that to you, you could just be in a holding pattern where you're not going to progress. So, find out, get those portfolio reviews, love your characters, don't give up, and lean into your own style, experiment and find your own style. This is, I think, the advice I can give.
Yeah, I love it. And if you get stuck and you're going to go people watch, don't try to get people to stop as they're walking by to say, "Hey, let me look at your hands," so that you can learn to draw the hands. They'll be creepy about your people watching when you go out there to get that inspiration.
Take pictures of your own hands. Just
That's
take
right.
pictures of your own hands when you get your friends to pose or whatever, and pose hands in front of you and take pictures of your spouse, or just get them, or just look at photographs you've got. It's not even complicated. You'll have a ton of photographs on your phone or your computer, and you'll see people's hands, and just use those as a reference photo. And as I say, take online courses about hands. They don't have to be perfect, but they just have to not be bad. So that's
and
key.
We just need the world to not be freaked out by illustrators trying to draw hands.
Yes.
Well, I appreciate I'll ask you one final question here. What's one piece of wisdom that you wish you would have had when you started this out, when you began the journey back on the balcony? What is something that you know now that you wish you would have known back then, or just maybe some wisdom to pass along to others that are getting started in this journey?
Yeah. I would say definitely keep going. Momentum's really important. So keep going with your art, keep developing, keep growing, keep learning. That's important. Your development matters. So keep investing in yourself and your development. And in between times, keep whatever your current job is, because the last thing you need is the pressure of no money. So in the meantime, keep your job, keep your stability, but invest in yourself. If you can spare money to do these development programs, do them. If you can spare money to go and visit the book festivals and get in front of the art directors, do that. All of that's your education. All of that's investing in your craft. You're crafting, you're learning, you're developing. So keep that momentum going and keep investing in yourself.
That's so good. When I think about most authors and illustrators that are getting started, if they have that freedom, because there's not the financial burden there, because the reality is most authors aren't full-time. Most illustrators aren't full-time at doing just this. There are some, but a lot do this in their spare time or on a part-time basis. And if you're able to live off of what you earn in your career and then put the money you make back into your business and growing and developing it expedites how fast you can actually step out of your career into this business that you've created. But if you step out there right out of the gate and say, I'm going to do this full time, and you're having to put food on the table or pay your bills to get by, that puts the burden on living versus building.
Yes.
So I think that's some great wisdom. Don't quit your day job yet.
But
not saying never.
Reinvest in yourself. Keep investing in yourself. Keep developing your craft, because it all does add up. It will add up. Put the hours in when you can put the hours in, because it all adds up and you will have the momentum. You will get there. You will just keep going.
Yeah. And there's some sacrifice to time with family and friends and all that. Put the investment in today and it'll pay dividends down the road. Well, this has been such a great interview. Thank you for sharing your journey and your creative process and just some insights you've learned along the way. And I think it's going to be very inspiring to many of our listeners out there. And speaking of our listeners, if you did find this episode to be helpful, make sure to like, share, subscribe, leave us a review on Apple or Spotify. Of course, we'd love for those to be great reviews, but we want you to be honest with the community out there. Also, I encourage you, if you are watching us on YouTube, or you don't even realize we have a YouTube channel, check us out. You can see this beautiful bald head of mine week in and week out as I get to interview other authors and illustrators and other industry professionals, as well as offer some great training about the industry. And so you can get on there, watch us on YouTube. And if you do watch us on YouTube, leave us a comment. Get on there, interact with our community. It helps us to grow and to bring more valuable content to you. And I just, before we go, Laura, where's the best place for people to connect to you? Speaking of community, where's the best place that they can connect to you and find your work?
Yeah, I have a website, which is www.lauramuncie.com. So you can connect on there. They've got my email addresses on there. You can also follow me on Instagram. So that would be the easiest place where you can see my work.
Perfect. And what I'll do is I'll drop that in the show notes in case you're wondering how to spell Muncie right now or where to find her on Instagram. I'll drop those in the show notes so that you can find and follow her and maybe even connect. Maybe you're looking for an illustrator and she'd be a great one to partner with. And if you are serious about turning your children's book into a sustainable brand, please check out my top-selling resource. It's called the Children's Author Toolbox. You can find that on Amazon. It's packed with practical strategies, industry insights, and really everything you need to go from being just a writer into becoming a recognized brand or a recognized author. So grab you a copy today and let's build something pretty amazing together. I'll also have that in the show notes, a link to that as well. It's going to be under all of Laura's great connection points. Down at the bottom, you'll be able to find that link. So we want to help you in the journey. But whether it's illustrations or building your brand, we want to be a resource to you. Thanks again to Laura Muncie for joining me today. Glad you were on the show.
Thank you, Andy. Thanks a lot.
You betcha. And thanks to our audience for tuning in today to the Children's Author Show. I want to encourage you, keep watching for more tips, inspiration, and expert advice that we bring to you every week. We'll see you next time.